Hello everyone, welcome to LUKMAAN IAS. Today we are going to have the Hindu analysis of 10th April 2021. So let us see which are the important articles in today's The Hindu newspaper. Yes, these are the important articles. Let us take overview of these articles first. First here, India does have a refugee problem. So the context of the article is that recently the Myanmar citizens escaping the military persecution that is happening in the country, and India has blocked the borders in northeastern states aligning the border with Myanmar. So that's why it was in news, and India does not have a separate dedicated refugee law at national level. And the context of the article is this. So from international relations GS2 paper, ethics in international relations is important subtopic of our syllabus in ethics paper, and from essay we can expect such essay topic on refugees also. Okay, next, time test ties. So here the context of the article, recent visit of foreign minister of Russia to India and India-Russia bilateral ties, the present situation, the positives in the relations, and the issues and challenges are being discussed in this article. So from international relations GS2 paper we are going to take input here. Then specifically prelims related articles not required for exercises India. So here the context is that recently US Navy had announced that freedom of navigation operations were conducted within India's exclusive economic zone. So this is now protested by India, and for such exercises the permission of the coastal nation is required according to UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So from basics we have to understand this convention, what is EEZ, what is territorial waters, internal waters, and yes, about the contiguous zone also. So here in detail we are going to understand these maritime zones. Next, people are free to choose religion, Supreme Court. So here Supreme Court was listening to one of the petition in front of it regarding the forceful conversions that are happening in the country. So in that respect, one of the judge in the Supreme Court has said that people are free to choose their religion. This is the fundamental right under Article 25 of Indian Constitution. So some inputs about that fundamental right we have to understand here from polity perspective. Next, Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy. So the context here is again one of the article in editorial page, and page number 6 is talking about E.V.R. Ramaswamy Naikar and the self-respect movement that happened in Tamil Nadu region. So from modern history perspective, socio-religious movements perspective of syllabus topic, we are going to take input here about this particular issue. Yes, let us go into details of all these articles. First, India does have refugee problem. Now, the context just now we have talked about this, that the military coup that happened on the 1st February 2021, and later on how the military junta is having the persecution on the protesters, the pro-democracy protesters that are protests that are happening in Myanmar. So many people are escaping this persecution and trying to come inside the borders of India in northeastern states. And that's why India has sealed the borders very strictly and not allowing the refugees to take refuge in India. That's why it is in news. Now the article is in detail discussing this issue of refugees, because yes, there is also the background of Rohingyas from Myanmar, Rohingya refugees from Myanmar. This is also the ongoing issue that we have as a contemporary issue, right? So we have to understand here some of the legal aspects, international, let's say, agreements, conventions that are there regarding refugees, and what should be the way forward. So yes, we have to understand this problem in detail. So first we have to understand that refugees and immigrants are different, let's say, persons, because refugees are called refugees, or those persons are called refugees because they are escaping political persecutions or war-like situation in the country where there is threat to life of the people. This is very specific. There is threat to life of the people in their home country. This is, we will say that we can designate that person as a refugee. Okay, it is not only about political persecution. The threat to life can be because of climate change also. They are now called as climate refugees. Climate change, right? So such instances are happening, but here we are going to specifically talk about Rohingyas and the recent conflict that is going on in Myanmar. So these are specifically refugees. And who are immigrants? The migrants. Generally there are like legal migrants or immigrants and illegal immigrants. Okay, and largely they have economic, political, social interests. Okay, so that means there is no threat to their life at home country, rather because of good economic opportunities, good standard of life, basically these people are moving to other countries. They can be legally moving, they can be illegally moving also. This is how we have to understand the difference between refugees and immigrants. Okay, however, what happens in India is the legal framework, here the ambiguity in legal framework in India. So what happens here, while understanding this legal framework, you need to understand that India's the only law, Foreigners Act 1946. This particular act clubbed these together, refugees and immigrants. They consider, this act consider them to as same. This is the major drawback that we can understand in India. At the same time, India is not signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees. Refugee Convention it is called, 1951, and subsequent protocol 1967. So India is not signatory to this convention, refugee convention or protocol, and that's why India is not bound to accept the refugees here, right? So that this is how the ambiguity in legal framework regarding this Foreigners Acts and the definition of refugee, okay, or immigrant. So here, according to this Foreigners Act, definition of refugee or immigrant is same, and that is, or the foreigners, definition of foreigner is that any person that is not citizen of India is the foreigner, or it can be labeled as refugee or immigrant. Okay, so it can be illegal immigrant also. This is how the ambiguity there is present in the legal framework. Along with that, we have to also understand that largely how India deals with refugee problems or immigrant problems in India is that we adopt the ad hoc approach here. Okay, that means which refugees are to be accepted and allowed to enter into India, which are not to be allowed into India. Largely this becomes the political matter. For example, at present, why India is not allowing refugee from Myanmar in the northeastern states? Because India surely fears about, let's say, those military officers or military junta in Myanmar at present in power may get angry because of such decision of India, and their ties with China may get closer, right? This is how China may further make inroads into Myanmar, India's neighboring country. This is how the politically motivated decisions are taken from time to time regarding refugees here. Okay, so later on we have to also understand the legal and moral complexities involved. For example, morally, India is one of the largest refugee acceptor in the world. Okay, so for example, in 1960s, how India accepted the Tibetan refugees into the India. At present, many Rohingya refugees are there in India, right? So this is how we have to also understand that many Tamilian escaped the civil war from the Tamil Nadu. They came into India. So India basically has been the important, let's say, location for refugees, influx of refugees in the past, and the moral aspect is that India stands for protecting them morally, because India's traditional values like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Atithi Devo Bhava, they talks about the let's say moral values of accepting the refugees, treating them with dignity and respect, right, and ensuring the basic civic rights to them. Along with that, the legal complexities that why India is not signing or ratifying the UN Convention on Refugees 1951, because the definition of the refugee in that particular convention only talks about the civic and political persecution and not the economic persecution. Along with that, at the present times, we can see that those who are signatories to the convention, they are not following the convention in letter and spirit. That we have seen that from the Syrian conflict that happened, and the Syrian refugees were denied access in many such European countries, though many of them were the signatories of refugee convention. This is how, when the Western countries or those countries are not accepting, then why India should be signing and ratifying this particular convention. These are the legal and moral complexities involved here. And lastly, as a way forward, what do we need at present is new domestic refugee law that is required. Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 is not the solution for refugees. Why? Because it is have the selective approach. It discriminates the people, refugees, on the basis of religion. At the same time, it is also talking about the cutoff date of year of 2014, and after that those who came into the India, they are not allowed the citizenship. So that's why CA is not the solution. Rather, there is need of dedicated refugee law at national level. Okay, and that particular law should have a clear definition of what constitute a refugee, what constitute illegal migrants and temporary migrants in the country. Okay, and how they should be treated. Along with that, the refugees should be given the basic human, let's say, amenities or basic amenities to them. For example, the shelter to them, or we can say that the right to livelihood, right to work, some work permit can be given to them. This is how we need to understand that they also have some basic human rights and they should be respected. Right, this should be the way forward. You can say that as India is having these traditional and ancient ethos that we have, and they should be, our policy towards refugees should be adherence to those values here. Fine. Okay, so ethics in international relations, GS4 paper, we are expecting essay topic on refugee problem also, and GS2 paper international relations. Okay. Yes, so what kind of question we can expect here? So you can see here, the way world has dealt with refugee problem shows that there is no ethics in international relations. Do you agree? Give justification. Such kind of question can be asked in ethics paper also. You can give the reference to Rohingya issue, Syrian refugees, or at present the refugee problem that is going on. Then absence of clear legal framework to deal with refugees in India is the major hurdle to deal with refugee problem effectively. Examine. Okay, so this is how we can take input from this particular article here. A very important topic, and we can say that the out of the box topic or article that have appeared here, and the relevant issue is discussed. Okay, yes. Moving on, the time test ties. So the context of the article is the recent visit of Russian foreign minister to India, the discussions that happened with our external affairs minister, and the outcome of visit, and overall the ties between two countries and issues and challenges between the bilateral relation. So what are the positives, the outcome we can say that of this visit? Yes, both countries agreed to further deepen the cooperation between or strategic cooperation, energy sector, nuclear and space sector. Okay, along with that, the defense sector, co-production and the technical cooperation, military technical cooperation, joint production of India-made Russian weapons. This is how both countries agreed on this. A free trade agreement with Eurasian Economic Union. So talks, progress on those talks also happened on this free trade agreement. Along with that, the further investment in connectivity projects like International North-South Transport Corridor and Chennai-Vladivostok Eastern Maritime Corridor. Okay, now which are these two? First, let us see in these maps here. International North-South Corridor, Transport Corridor. You can see here the existing transport corridor or standard route from this St. Petersburg is through Baltic Sea, North Sea and then into Mediterranean Sea, then Suez Canal and here reaching to Mumbai. Now, as an alternative route to this, there is North-South Corridor is being built and the cooperation between Russia and India is happening here. You can see the land route here up till Iran. So St. Petersburg, Moscow, then Astrakhan. Up till now we are in Russia, then Azerbaijan, Baku. This is Caspian Sea. This is Caspian Sea. And then entering into Iran, Bandar Abbas, and then through Arabian Sea, Mumbai. This is the North-South Transport Corridor that we have. And the second one is Chennai-Vladivostok Eastern Maritime Corridor. You can see here, the Vladivostok is the easternmost important location of Russia or city of Russia. And from that, you can see this corridor that's from the Strait of Malacca, South China Sea, Strait of Malacca, and then entering into China here. So this is going to be the Eastern Maritime Corridor, right? So the further connectivity investment in these two transport corridors is going to happen here and the cooperation between India and Russia will happen in this direction. Now, what are the issues and challenges? Through this particular visit, the divergence between two countries can be seen from the public remarks made by both ministers here. For example, the foreign minister of Russia praised many times Russia-China ties in that particular document and then made indirect reference to Quad as Asian NATO. Okay, so this is how the Russia does not want to have Quad or it is not in favor of Quad. Along with that, both countries were on the different tables regarding the approach to Afghan peace process. Russia wants Taliban to have the power sharing and India wants to have democratic process in Afghanistan. Okay, so this is how, along with that, when the foreign minister came in India, our prime minister did not, let's say, have the bilateral visit with the foreign minister. However, immediately he went to Pakistan and he was received, we can say that, by Prime Minister of Pakistan. Okay, so this is how the difference between the ties or the differences or the issues we can see here. Even Russia agreed to further increase the military cooperation between Pakistan and Russia to tackle the terrorism in that country, right? So these are the issues and challenges at present. Along with that, there was no mention of important, let's say, the CATSA sanction that US may have on S-400 missile systems are to be imported in India from Russia. So there was no mention about those, let's say, military ties or the transaction. So these are the issues and challenges and the positives. So as a follow-up to India-Russia bilateral relationship, further later on this year there will be visit of Russian President Mr. Putin, bilateral visit, annual bilateral visit. So again there will be further progress in the bilateral relations. So in this manner we have to take input here. Okay, now specifically prelims related developments not required for exercises India. So the context here is that Ministry of External Affairs has recently released the statement or protested on, let's say, US Navy's 7th Fleet and its ship USS John Paul Jones had carried out freedom of navigation operations in the India's EEZ in Western Indian Ocean. So this particular statement released by US Navy, it is now the reply is given by our external ministry, and said that the position, India's position on UN Convention on Law of Seas is that the convention does not authorize other states to carry out in EEZ on the continental shelf military exercises or military maneuvers, in particular those involving the use of weapons, explosive, without the consent of coastal states. This permission is required when there are military maneuvers and not if they are simply transiting through. This is how we have to understand the kind of, the basic thing you need to understand is India ratified UN clause, but US has not signed or ratified this particular convention. What is this convention? UN Convention on Law of Seas, very important. It came into force in 1994, and as a result of United Nations Conference on Law of Seas, third conference here that happened between 1973 to 82. Now it categorizes let's say the continental waters in this manner into different maritime zones, and different rights are given to the coastal nation and other such countries for the freedom of navigation and extraction of resources and all. Okay, so you can see here, this is the top view, this is the side view. So there is baseline, this dotted line is baseline, you can see here, and all the distances are measured from the baseline. All the distances are measured from the baseline for different zones. So first one, or we can say that the waters from the baseline towards the land is called as internal waters. It's called as internal waters. Here you can see, right? Then from this baseline towards sea, there are 12 nautical miles. 12 nautical miles, this is territorial sea. This will be called as territorial sea. You can see here the territorial sea, 12 nautical miles, this is. Then further 12 nautical miles, there will be contiguous zone like this. There will be contiguous zone. That means from baseline it is 24 nautical miles. Then from baseline to further 200 nautical miles, you can see here, this will be exclusive economic zone, 200 nautical miles. You can see in this exclusive economic zone from this to this, right? So these are the maritime zones according to UNCLOS. Beyond 200 nautical miles there is high seas. There is high seas here. Now sometimes what happens is continental shelf is shorter than EEZ. Sometimes the continental shelf is larger than the EEZ to some of the countries. Then what happens is it itself categorizes the continental shelf. Okay, and the continental shelf is also one of the part of maritime zone now. It can be beyond EEZ also. It can be beyond EEZ also. Okay. So this is the national airspace up to territorial sea, and beyond territorial sea there is international airspace. Okay, this is how we have to understand the different maritime zones. Now what are the different activities allowed in those zones? You can see here. First, internal waters up to towards landward sides from the baseline. And the coastal state is free to set laws, regulate, use any resource. The foreign vessels have no right of passage within the internal waters. This is important. No right for the foreign vessels. Then territorial waters up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline, and the coastal state is free to set laws, regulate, use any resources. Also here, vessels given right to innocent passage, right to innocent passage, and fishing, polluting and weapons practice and spying are not innocent practices. That means the foreign countries are not allowed the fishing activities, polluting activities, spying or weapons. Submarines and other underwater vehicles are required to navigate on the surface in this zone by displaying their flag of the country. Okay, this is how the territorial waters up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline. Then we have the contiguous zone. Basically this is the transition zone from territorial waters to EEZ, and in this transition zone actually the state can continue to enforce laws on 4 specific areas: customs, taxation, immigration and pollution. So basically whenever there is infringement on these laws or areas, then the states can have the pursuit over those elements. So that's why it is called as hot pursuit area. Contiguous zone is known as hot pursuit area. And then beyond these 24 nautical miles, we can say that the total area is exclusive economic zone, extends up to 200 nautical miles from the baseline. Right, this EEZ, the coastal nation is allowed to explore all kinds of, let's say, resources, natural resources, and the sole rights are given to coastal nation for exploitation. However, freedom of navigation is there for foreign nations and overflight subject to regulation of coastal states. So this is how we have to understand, subject to regulation of coastal states. Freedom of navigation is there, but subject to regulation of coastal states. At the same time, the foreign states may also allow to lay submarine pipes and cables also. Okay, now the continental shelf. It is defined as natural prolongation of land territory to the continental margins outer edge, so or 200 nautical miles from the coastal states baseline, whichever is greater. Right. Now, this particular continental shelf can be exceeding 200 nautical miles until natural prolongation ends. However, it may not exceed to 350 nautical miles from the baseline. That means it can be up to 350 nautical miles only. Then the coastal state have the right to harvest minerals, non-living materials in the subsoil of its continental shelf by exclusion of other states. Right. However, the coastal states have exclusive control over living resources attached to continental shelf, but not creatures living in the water column beyond exclusive economic zone. Not on the living creatures beyond EEZ. This is the basic difference here between continental shelf and EEZ. Beyond EEZ or this continental shelf, the sea will be called as high seas. Now these are the global commons. High seas are called as global commons, and they are allowed to use by each and every country, or even the exploitation of resources is allowed by all countries with permission of International Seabed Authority that is established under this convention. International Seabed Authority. For example, India got permission from this authority to extract manganese nodules from we can say high seas in Indian Ocean region. Okay, so along with that, the landlocked states are given right to access to and from the seas without taxation traffic through the transit states. Right. So for example, Nepal and Bhutan, so they also have the transit, or we can say that the access to and from the sea is given according to this particular convention. Right. Now let us try to solve this question as practice MCQ. Yes, first statement, we have to understand the statements about EEZ and the correct statements have to be identified. Coastal nation has to take permission of International Seabed Authority for exploitation of natural resources within EEZ. So basically here such permission is not required within EEZ, rather beyond EEZ in high seas, right? So the coastal nations actually have the sole let's say permission, or they have rights for the exploitation of resources within EEZ. So this is incorrect statement. Foreign nations have freedom of navigation and overflight in EEZ subject to regulation of coastal states. This is correct statement. Foreign states are allowed to lay submarine pipes and cables in EEZ. This is also correct. So that's why answer should be 2 and 3. Right? Yes. Next. People are free to choose religion, Supreme Court. So Supreme Court was listening to one of the petition regarding the compulsion or the compulsory or forceful conversions, religious conversions that are happening in the country. However, the right to propagation of one's religion, this is the fundamental right under Article 25. So again Supreme Court has highlighted that under Article 25, the fundamental right says that all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience, right to freely profess, practice and propagate religion subject to these conditions: public order, morality and health. So there are 4 meanings under these articles: right to freedom of conscience, right to profess religion, right to practice religion, right to propagate. They have different meaning. How? Let us try to understand. Freedom of conscience. Conscience is let's say every person's inner self. Okay, it is kind of moral compass that every person has, and this conscience is a very much independent moral authority of every person, and it says that this particular conscience, that means the person's conscience or the self, can have established any kind of relation with the God. This is the independent area of that person here. Okay, so that's why it is freedom of conscience. That means the person, the way the person wants to establish the relation between self and God, it is his own, we can say, domain. So this is freedom of conscience. Then right to freely profess. That means I am free, or we can say I have right to freely declare without any fear my religion. What is my religion? Okay, so we can say that freely profess the religion. Then practice, that means the religious practices. So I have freedom of conducting my religious practices according to what the religious scriptures are talking about. So this is the freedom that is there. And lastly, freedom to propagate the religion. So I am, or every person is having this right to propagate his or her religion in the society, in the country. Okay, so the person can, let's say, preach that his religion is good and all the scriptures, and yes, what are the tenets of the religion. So this is the right to propagation of religion under Article 25. There can be question in prelims examination. Article 25 of Indian Constitution includes which of the following? Freedom of conscience, right to propagate religion, right to practice religion. So this is how the question can be asked. They can give any wrong option there. Along with that, Supreme Court has said that religious faith is part of fundamental right to privacy. Basically, it is freedom of conscience. It is the private matter of the person. So it is part of right to privacy also, and right to privacy is now being called as part of right to life and dignity and liberty. Okay, so this is how we have to understand. Along with that, the forceful conversions impinge on this particular freedom of conscience that is guaranteed to all equally under Article 25. So there can be again question in prelims examination: forceful religious conversions impinge on which of the following fundamental right of Indian Constitution? Right. So freedom of conscience, that is there in Article 25. This one. Fine. Okay. Next, Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy and self-respect movement. Actually, there is one article regarding Periyar Ramaswamy and self-respect movement on page number 6, editorial page. That article is not that much important in detail, rather from history perspective and socio-religious movements we have to take input here. Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy self-respect movement. Yes, he was social activist and politician who started this self-respect movement. Okay, and Dravidar Kazhagam. He is also known as father of Dravidian movement, and he rebelled against Brahminical dominance and gender and caste inequality in Tamil Nadu region. So basically this self-respect movement was against Brahminical dominance in the society. Self-respect movement is, we can say that, the lower caste movement or for the caste equality, removing caste inequality. So basically it was against the Brahminical dominance in the society. Then in 1939 he was elected as the head of Justice Party, and in 1944 he changed its name as Dravida Kazhagam. Later on this party broke up, and the one group led by C.N. Annadurai formed this DMK, Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, in 1949. As there are assembly elections going on in Tamil Nadu, you also need to know this particular information. DMK party is there, very famous in Tamil Nadu. So the background of that DMK party, the founder C.N. Annadurai, and we can say it broke from this Dravida Kazhagam. Earlier it was Justice Party. Started with self-respect movement against Brahminical dominance in the society. Okay, so this is the basic information about Periyar Ramaswamy self-respect movement, socio-religious movements, modern history. Fine. Yes, these were important articles from today's The Hindu newspaper. For further information on editorial discussion classes or ED classes, wherein in-depth analysis of mains related issues and articles is done by Ansari Sir and team, you can contact LUKMAAN IAS. Thank you.